Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Hannah. Here we talk about books, chronic illness and life in Amsterdam. I feel like I have not sat down for a book video in ages. Well, that's because I haven't. I've just been battling my chronic illness for a while, which means my reading's gone down, and when I'm not really reading, I'm not really inspired to make book content, and it kind of is a self-fulfilling prophecy in that way. But I'm aware I've not been keeping up to date with radar videos for you, and I get so many cute messages from people saying how much they love them, so I wanted to give you a bumper radar video today, including new releases that came out in February and are coming out in March, so like books you've missed so far this year. If you're new around here, radar videos where I just share new releases in the literary fiction, translated fiction, and political, socioeconomic, memoir, non-fiction categories, books that I would like to read that I think if you like my taste, you might like them too. Definitely not books, like it's not a TBR and it's not a shopping list, but they're all books I'm excited about, and if you've read any of them, I would love to hear about it, or if you've heard any things, let me know in the comments. So without further ado, we're just going to get started because I have a lot of books, I think 25 or 26 books to talk about today. And the first one is The South by Tash Aw. I have another one of this author's books on my shelves and I haven't read it, which shame on me, so I won't be purchasing this until I read that first one. But I've heard brilliant things about their storytelling. So this says, when his grandfather dies, a boy named Jay travels south with his family to the property he left them, a once flourishing farm that has fallen into disrepair. The trees are deceased, the fields are parched from the months of drought, and still Jay's father Jack sends him out to work on the land, or whatever land is really left. Over the course of these hot, dense days, Jay finds himself drawn to Chuan, a son of the farm's manager, different from him in every way except once. Out in the fields and on the streets into the town, the change between the boys intensifies. Inside the house, other family members confront their own regrets and begin to drift apart. Like the land around them, they are powerless to resist the global forces that threaten to render their lives obsolete. At once sweeping and intimate, a story of what happens when public and private lives collide. This is the first in a quartet of novels that form a masterful portrait of the family negotiating a period of great change, a reimagined epic. I was sold as I was describing that to you, and then when it said this is the first in a quartet of novels about one family, I was like, big tick. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's waiting for Jonathan Franzen's next issue of the Crossroads trilogy. I love sinking into an intergenerational family saga, and one that is so epic it needs multiple books. Sign me up. I believe, but please correct me because I don't have it here, that Tash Aw and her books are set in Malaysia, I believe, but that could be incorrect. No, I really have a feeling it is because I think my friend read it on a trip, and you know, everyone likes to read books about the places they were set. So I'm pretty sure that is the case, but happy to be corrected there. Next up, we have a book by an author who I already love, and this is Han Kang's new book, We Do Not Part, published on 6th of February by Penguin. I can't believe I haven't gotten to this yet. I do have a proof of it, but I just haven't really been in the mood for something really cerebral, and this does contain a lot of dream-like sequences, which for me are not my favourite, but for Han Kang, I will do it. This deals with, Han Kang has written The Vegetarian, but her favourite book that I think, and her best book, is Human Acts, where she dives into South Korean historical events, particularly around like ideas of resistance and sort of governmental forces. And this is no different. It says, beginning one morning in December, this traces the path as Kyunga travels from the city of Seoul into the forests of Jeju Island, the home of her old friend In Sohn. Hospitalized following an accident, she's begged her to hasten there and feed her beloved pet bird who will otherwise die. But first she takes a plane to Jeju, and then a snowstorm hits the island the moment she arrives, plunging her into a world of white. Beset by icy wind and snow squalls, she wonders if she will arrive in time to save the bird or even survive this terrible cold. As night falls, she struggles her way to In Sohn's house, unaware that of the descent into darkness that awaits her. The long-buried story of her family surges into light in dreams and memories passed from mother to daughter, and a painstakingly assembled archive documenting the massacre on the island 70 years before. So this talks about the Jeju Island massacre, which happened, I think, in the 1950s or 1960s. Jeju Island is like a province, an island off the coast of South Korea, which I was so lucky to visit when I went to South Korea a few years back. It's so beautiful. It has a wonderful history, in terms of like these female divers who dive for pearls, and the food history there is amazing. But I didn't know about this massacre, which shame on me, but this sounds like it could be so brilliant. And I trust Han Kang to tell us like unpopular parts of Korean, of her history, to do it really well. So that is We Do Not Part. Okay, then I have Hungerstone by Kat Dunn, which is using the like fainting Renaissance woman portrait on the cover, which we've seen too many times now, if you ask me, particularly paired with the neon font. Anyway, this does sound interesting. It says, 10 years into their marriage, Lenore's relationship with her husband Henry has soured. No child has arrived to fill the distance between them, and Lenore's frustration grows when Henry's ambitions, both work and societal, take them out of London and into the countryside to the imposing Nethershore manor where he's planning to host a hunt. Lenore keeps a terrible secret from the last time her husband hunted, and though they never speak of it, it haunts their marriage to this day. A carriage accident near their home soon brings the mysterious Camilla into Lenore's life. Camilla, who is weak and pale during the day but vibrant at night. Camilla, who will not eat meals with them but stirs up a deep hunger with Lenore. Torn between regaining her husband's affection and the desires Camilla presence awakes in her, Lenore begins to unravel her past, and her search leads to uncover the darkness in her household that set on destroying her. This says it's a reclaiming of the lesbian vampire trope. Now look, I don't read books set in this time period. I'm not really a vampire person. Twilight was not my thing. But something about this sounds really intriguing to me. And I recently read Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fito, which was also set in a similar, my history is really terrible, so maybe it's not a similar period of time. But there was carriages and outfits and house mistresses and old manors. And this feels like it could be really interesting. And I think we are going to see this year a big resurgence in both contemporary and older sort of rehashing of the vampire trope away from Twilight and contemporary romance. I mean, sort of in the literary world. I've seen a few different books pop up about it. So if you're a vampire person, if you're looking for your Twilight Renaissance, maybe this is your moment, and that is Hungerstone. Okay, I have Cloudless by Rupert Dastur. This is published by Penguin on the 27th. This is set in 2004. It says, in a farmhouse on the hills outside of, I'm going to butcher this Welsh name, even though I've literally been there and have friends who live there, Llandudno? A family endures the agonising wait for their son to return from Iraq. His decision to join up has left them reeling, and yet there are other pressing concerns to be met at home. The working of the farmland that's been theirs for generations, and what to do with their other troubled son. Catherine's childhood sweetheart comes back to their small town, giving the boy's doting mother a glimpse into the life she could have had. And John, their father, falls once more into his gambling habit, even as the farm sits on the brink of bankruptcy. As each member of the family grasps at their own tenuous lifeline, they drift further from one another until on one cold evening there is a fateful knock at the door. Written in luminous, exquisite prose, Cloudless is a portrait of fragility and resilience. Really interested in this time period, particularly like the state of politics within the family realm when people went to leave to fight in Iraq, and sort of, especially now, reflecting on that experience, I think a lot of people, and interested in the rurality of this story, of the working farm, of the debt, of what it means to be a small farmer in Wales in the 2000s. Something about this just intrigued me, I think. Okay, then I have more of a light-hearted, maybe. I mean, it is a murder mystery, so it depends how seriously you take murder, but it sounds like more of a light-hearted story that perhaps I would listen to on audio or read on holiday. This is The Glass House by Rachel Donahue, not to be mixed up with Caroline Donahue, another Irish writer that I love. This says, 1963, an isolated modernist mansion of the controversial figure Richard Acklehurst is the glittering annual New Year's Eve party has not quite gone as planned. Considered genius by some and something far darker by others, by evening's end, he will be dead in mysterious circumstances, casting a long shadow over the lives of his teenage daughters. In 1999, after Acklehurst's grave is vandalised, his daughters are forced to return to the childhood home where they must finally confront the complex and dark dynamic at the heart of their family. The story of two sisters, their secrets of love and regret. So yeah, it's a murder mystery, but dual timeline, family secrets, kind of controversial cultural artist figure. Just sounds like it could be a good time, you know? Okay, a book that my mum actually like twigs to me, which my mum is a big reader, thankfully, and loves literary fiction. And she pulled out a copy of a review of this in, I think, the Sunday Times when I was last visiting her, and she wanted to pick it up. She did then proceed to buy it when we were in a bookshop together. So I will be borrowing her copy of This Immaculate Body by Emma Van Stratton, published by Little Brown. It says, Alice has been cleaning Tom's flat every Wednesday for a year, with every smudge wiped from his coffee cup, every crease smoothed out on his bed, every multivitamin counted from a jar. Alice spirals deeper into infatuation. But as Alice prepares for the moment when they will finally meet face to face, she discovers that love might not be the cure she thought it was. A story of obsession, the way women view the world and the way the world views them, as Alice frantically tries to cling to an imagined future with Tom. The line between fantasy and reality becomes blurred and puts everything she's dreamed of at risk. This setup sounds so fascinating. There's a book by Vigdis Hjorth called Is Mother Dead, which is one of my favourite books I've read in recent years. And it is a different setup. It's about a mother and a daughter, but the daughter's essentially stalking her own mum because she is fascinated, infatuated by their distance and by the life choices each of them have made. And it does that creeping, watching, claustrophobic feeling so well, and I think this might do too. Especially, it sounds like she's a very sort of pernickety person as a cleaner, counting the vitamins. Like, it just sounds like it could get really creepy, but also a really fascinating, like, social question at its core. So that's This Immaculate Body. I have Before We Hit the Ground. This is published... we're still in February. I was just checking if we had moved into March reads yet. No, it's published on the 27th of February by HarperCollins. And this has quite a short description. It's set between Scotland and Ghana, which I love, a multi-country sort of like migratory setting of a story. And this is about queer love. It says, Elon cannot make sense of love. It's like a language he cannot speak, its words, even though he's heard the words before. He wants to feel understood by his well-meaning yet misapprehending family, his self-assured partner Ben, and his boisterous friends, but he never knows the right thing to say. How can you know yourself in a world that's constantly changing? Set across Ghana and then Scotland is an intimate portrait of one man's search for belonging, a family's attempt to love, and the choices that make up a life. Coming of age, queer, love story set amongst different cultures and questions. This just sounds like my kind of catnip story that I would definitely devour. Okay, then we have Deviant, published on the 13th by Penguin. This is by Santanu Bhattacharya. This is another queer love story. It says, an epic text for the South Asian queer community. Vivan, a teenager in India's Silicon Plateau, has discovered love on his smartphone, intoxicating, boundary-breaking love. His parents know he is gay and their support is something he can count on, but they don't know exactly what he gets up to in the online world. For his uncle, born 30 years earlier, things were different. Mambo's life changed forever when he fell for a male classmate at the time, and in a country where persecution of gay people was rife under colonial-era law that criminalised homosexuality. And before that was Mambo's uncle, Sukumar, a young man hopelessly in love with another young man but forced by social taboos to keep their relationship secret at all costs. Sukumar would never live a life he yearned for, but his story would ignite and inspire his nephew and grandnephew after him. Deviance explores the histories we inherit and the legacies we leave behind. I love the idea of this being intergenerational, but through these queer men in the family. That's a fascinating construction of intergenerational family saga. I think we don't often hear through that lineage, and on top of it being about queer history in a country where it was illegal to be queer for such a long time. I just think this could be really, really beautiful and moving. But we have Colony. This is a translated book published by Scribe on the 13th of March. This is a book that I have heard a lot of things about. Lots of friends have early copies and reviewed it, and it is cultish, communish, which are big buzzwords for me if you know anything about my reading or my TV taste. This says, one morning, Amelia can't get out of bed. Her therapist calls it burnout. Her neighbours call it tiny work death. She needs to get away from the brightness of the city lights, the noise of the people, and the constant demands. She goes to the woods, pitches her tents, breathes, and that's where she sees them, the colony. A man with a sad face, a tall, strong, older woman. A woman in her 40s squatting to examine an anthill. Another woman in her 40s, short, long hair, ample bosom, good posture. The leader? An extremely beautiful man, a slightly younger man, and a teenage boy sitting away from the group. Who are they? What do they mean to each other? And why do they behave in these strange ways? Thanking the fish they eat, sleeping under a tree, singing off key, dancing without music, and never letting the boy fully in. As Amelia becomes more and more drawn to the colony, she begins to evaluate her own life. Wouldn't it be nice to live as these seven do, apart from society? But groups always have their dynamics and roles. Which are you, and what if you want to change? Have a hit and miss with cult fiction, commune fiction. I suppose I recently read Hagstone by Sinead Gleason, which I absolutely adored. But then last summer I read Wild Creatures by Amy Twigg, and could have taken or left it. I didn't think it was that good of an exploration. This sounds closer to Wild Creatures than it does to Hagstone. Maybe there's a mix of the two in there. I'm not sure which language this is translated from. That would also be interesting to me, but I'm definitely keen to give it a go. That's Colony. Okay, then we have Deep Cuts by Holly Brickley, published by HarperCollins on the 13th of March. This is a nostalgic 2010s or to 2000s kind of novel, I think, which sometimes we're all partial to a little nostalgia. So this says, the first time Joe plays Percy on one of his songs in his college dorm in 2000, she realizes three things. 1, she is watching a star in the making. 2, she can shape his music into something extraordinary. And 3, she will always be on the sidelines. She swallows her jealousy and throws herself into collaboration, transforming Joe's songs into those indie hits with her blistering critiques. But there's an undercurrent to the music they're making, something undeniably electric, hurtling towards love, and then almost inevitably towards heartbreak. As Joe steps into the spotlight, can Percy bear to watch in silence? Can he exist there without her? I really do love a music-driven novel. Like, I was a fan of Daisy Jones and the Six when it first came out on audiobook, and I've had a few since then. I think sort of the behind the scenes of music making and band culture and dynamics can make for really good fodder for literary fiction stories. And I think this one could be great. I think my partner would enjoy it too as a big music head, so keen to see what other people think of Deep Cuts. A book published by Europa. Sorry, we're back to February. I must have messed up my order. This is the Tokyo Suite. I love Europa's covers, and they often pick up some quite interesting novels, I think. So this is about a nanny. It says, a good nanny is hard to find. Fernanda, a busy executive whose marriage is floundering, has a room in her sprawling house redecorated in the style of a tiny luxurious hotel room, the Tokyo Suite, to entice her maid Maju to stay. Still, one morning, Maju walks out of the door, slips past the army of nannies in the square, gets into a taxi and vanishes, and takes Fernanda's daughter with her. Consumed by her own professional and personal crisis, Fernanda doesn't first notice that Cora, her daughter, is missing and that Maju has kidnapped her, but when she does, she's violently pulled back into the reality and vagaries of her domestic life. Meanwhile, Maju is with Cora in tow in cheap motels and abandoned locales. She makes her way across the Brazilian countryside, carrying out her plan, which will quickly and brutally veer out of control. Here we set into motion the lives of characters endlessly searching for something: affection, redemption, sex, love, to free them. Cora's disappearance puts the past and the present on a collision course and ignites desire, resentment, and class tension. I think we've had a few books in recent years about the nanny kidnapping a child, or nanny, just like nanny, the bad nanny stories. This one sounds interesting, set in Brazil, looking at class, and I like the idea of this tiny luxury hotel room that the nannies get to sleep in. Yeah, I think this could make for a quite fast-paced and terrifying, I guess, in places story. And particularly, I think, with a change of perspective throughout. Then I have a new book by Naomi Booth. I love Naomi Booth's writing. I think I've read 3 or 4 of hers. Most notably is Exit Management, a book about the London housing crisis. I think is so well pulled off. This is raw content though, and this is a story about motherhood. Grace's work requires her to be careful. She spends her days reading and editing legal case files, making sure the latest judgments are published as quickly and accurately as possible. But outside of work, she's not a careful person. Her father's history as a police officer working across the infamous case shadows her life, as does the violent history entrenched in the Colne Valley landscape of her childhood, and the fears often surface as recklessness. When she becomes unexpectedly pregnant, she tries to accommodate her boyfriend in the prospect of a baby in her life, but after the strange joy of birth, she starts to imagine all sorts of terrible injuries and deaths befalling her child. The steep stairs to her apartment, the kitchen scissors, the boiling kettle, they all contain visceral and overwhelming potential for disaster. The baby's vulnerability terrifies her, and her relationship begins to show, and her family history and repressed memories of violence come to the surface. This sounds an incredibly intense read. I've read a few intense motherhood books recently, which is not really the vibe I'm trying to go for when I'm thinking about my own, hopefully, future as mum. But I really have heard friends and sort of friends, family members talk about this experience of having kids, and then sort of the whole world looks different, and having quite intrusive and overwhelming thoughts about danger. And I already have those thoughts when I'm just holding my friend's baby. I'm like, what would happen if I dropped her, or if we're, I don't know, crossing a bridge or anything like that. I understand those impulsive feelings, I think. So I'm interested to read it from Naomi Booth's point of view. And like I say, I love her writing and what she does with themes. So definitely one I will be seeking out. Okay, a Welsh novel published by Granta. This is A Room Above a Shop, sort of quiet 1980s, I think, queer story from Wales. When two quiet men form a tentative connection, neither of them know where it might lead. M has inherited his family's ironmongery business, and B is younger by 11 years and can see no future in the place he's grown up in. But when M offers him a job and lodgings, he accepts. As the two men work side by side in the shop, they also begin a life together in a one shared room above. The kind of life they never imagined possible, and they risk everything if their public performance were to slip. Unfolding in South Wales against the backdrop of Section 28, the age of consent debate, the HIV and AIDS crisis, a tender and resonant love story. This sounds beautiful and probably devastating, and it has a really interesting cultural context in terms of Wales, small town Wales, and the time period. So I think this would be beautiful and perhaps quite sad in places too. Then I have Beartooth by Callan, published by Granta as well. This is framed as a mystery thriller, and I don't know what it is about this setting, because this is nothing like anything I can relate to, but something about poaching I find really fascinating. I just watched a 3-part documentary on rhino horn poaching, which was really good. I do recommend it. It was on Sky. I think it's called The Great Rhino Robbery. Anyway, this is set in Montana. The author is a Dylan Thomas Prize shortlist there, and I love the Dylan Thomas Prize, so that's always a big tick for me. This says, in the Montana backcountry live two brothers who run a sawmill and do a little poaching on the side. Thad is the brains behind the operation, and his brother Hazen has a talent for tracking, hunting, and getting into trouble. Together they just about made it work, but now they're mounting bills, a leaky roof, and winter's closing in. When a menacing figure known as the Scot offers them a risky but potential lucrative hunting job in the Yellowstone National Park, they can't refuse, but before long the precarious nature of their lives and bonds is exposed. This is a bracing story of the cost of survival set against the unforgiving wilderness of the American Northwest. Something about this sounds like it might tickle my brain. I think it would be quite an anxiety-inducing read by the sounds of things, quite high stakes, like it says. But Tom, my partner, recently read The Borrowed Hills by Scott Preston. I was just checking what it was called, which is about sheep rustling in Wales and about rurality and sort of undercover rural goings on, which I have very little connection to, being born in the suburbs and growing up near London, whereas my partner is very in tune with rural things. So I guess I find it interesting because it's very different to the childhood I grew up in. But this one, even in the American context, I think might be fascinating to him as well as me. Then we have some short stories. This is published by Soho Press. It's called Accidents Happen and Other Stories, and the author F.H. Batacan is Filipino and sort of a well-known Filipino crime writer who's now moved across to these genre-bending short stories documenting murders, disappearance, and acts of violence, from procedural crime to horror and near-future noir. When Batacan's first novel was published, Smaller and Smaller Circles, it was an instant classic in 1999, a masterpiece of Filipino crime fiction that won the Philippine National Book Award. But in this extraordinary and far-ranging story, she explores the darkest corners of the human experience, depicting with black humour the systems of class and politics that her characters are stuck in, and the moments of violence, accidental or otherwise, that can at any moment shatter lives. In particular, Batacan shines an unsparing light on the epidemic of violence against women in the Philippines. When a wealthy politician's son disappears, the family driver witnesses the aftermath. A field investigator for the World Health Organization travels the globe giving presentations about a biomedical enzyme that will extinguish the human race. And Father Augusto is a Jesuit priest and forensic anthropologist from smaller and smaller circles, returns to investigate the murder of a woman whose secretive life holds the key to her death. I want to look up this author's crime fiction anyway. The Philippines is on my mind a lot at the moment. If you're following the news, you will perhaps be on your mind too, as their previous leader has just landed in the Netherlands, where I live, to be tried at the court at The Hague, which is like the court for international crimes against humanity, for his hand in extrajudicial killings for people during sort of the war on drugs in the Philippines. I tried to read the non-fiction book that was published by the female journalist about the war on drugs there, but I found it so incredibly difficult and violent to read that I had to stop. I listened to it on audio. It's a devastating part of very recent Filipino history, but this one sounds like it will touch perhaps on those things, but also in general about femicide and murders, disappearances and acts of violence. So perhaps one I'm not ready for right now, but would love to know if you've read Smaller and Smaller Circles, their novel, and if I should pick that up instead. Got an Irish novel. This is Ordinary Saints, published by Bonnier Books on the 13th of March, called, did I say it's called Ordinary Saints? It won the Queer Prize, PFD Queer Fiction Prize in 2022. It says, brought up in a devout household in Ireland, Jay is now living in London with her girlfriend, determined to live day to day and not think too much about the future or the past. But when she learns her beloved older brother, who died in a tragic accident, may be made into a Catholic saint, she must confront her family, her childhood, and herself. This is inspired by the author's own devout upbringing, brilliant debut, and a new voice in Irish fiction. I love books about Catholicism. I love queer novels, and this sounds like it could be a really interesting coming-of-age story about those two things. Okay, we're finally moving on to non-fiction. I've got a few less to talk about, but none the same. Is that the saying? I love non-fiction books. They make up a huge part of my reading, and I love to share upcoming or lesser known non-fiction books. This is Frighten the Horses, a memoir of transition by Oliver Radclyffe, published by Atlantic Books on the 27th of February. As the daughter of two well-to-do English parents and the wife of a handsome, successful man, Oliver Radclyffe checked every box: marriage, children 4, and a white picket fence in a stately home in Connecticut. But beneath this shiny veneer, Oliver's hair was falling out in clumps, he couldn't eat, and his mood swings brought him to tears. And then, on an otherwise remarkable afternoon, he realised the life he was living was not his own. Frighten the Horses is a trans man's coming-of-age story about a housewife who initially comes out as a lesbian, who tentatively steps into the world of queerness. With growing courage and support of his newfound family, Oliver is finally able to face the question of his gender identity and becoming the man he wants to be. Obviously, an incredibly important book of all times, but especially now, especially being published in the States. I feel like, me personally, I read a lot of books about trans women and I follow a lot of trans women and keep up with that, but I feel perhaps it's less common, or I just haven't sought it out, that I read memoirs about trans men. So this is definitely one that I would like to find a copy of. Okay, this is kind of Korean, Stories from an American Life by Joan Sung. For fans of Crying in H Mart and Minor Feelings, a coming-of-age memoir of daughter of immigrants discovering her Korean identity and how to forgive her tiger mum. In this courageous memoir of parental love, intergenerational trauma and perseverance, Joan breaks the generational silence that cursed her family, overcoming the stereotype that all Asians are quiet. She tells the story of coming of age with a tiger mum who did not understand American society. Torn between two identities as a Korean woman and a first-gen American, she bears her struggles in honest confessional, sifting through the experiences of microaggressions and the over-fetishization of Asian women. She connects the COVID pandemic to decades of violence and racism experienced by Asian American communities. Yeah, again, I just love to read a memoir about other people's experiences that are different to my own, and this one sounds like it will be. I'm sorry, I have messed up the order. I have a couple of novels to talk about that I missed out. I'm sorry. This is Counterattacks at 30 by Wong Pung Song, who wrote Almond, which I never read, but lots of people love. But this sounds like a funny, somewhat dystopian, speculative story about workism and late-stage capitalism, neoliberalism. It says, G is a ordinary woman who has never been extraordinary. In her administrative job at the academy, she silently tolerates office politics and the absurdities of Korean bureaucracy, forever only one misplaced email away from a career catastrophe. She effectively becomes the master of the silent eye roll and the tactical coffee run. But all her efforts to endure her superiors and semi-hostile work environment they create are undid when a new intern arrives. Like a pacifist version of V for Vendetta, she recruits a trio of office allies to carry out plans for minor revenge. Together, these 4 rebels commit tiny protests against those in more powerful positions through spraying graffiti, throwing eggs, and writing anonymous exposés. But as their attacks increase, the initial joy they felt at the release becomes something more, and the others will discover the beauty of friendship and the power of unity. This sounds like it could be really funny, and I love the idea of sabotaging your office workplace. I hope you're all out there doing that. And I think this could be, really funny, and sounds a bit like the Dutch novel We Must Remove This Post, and also, what other books about workism have I read? I read that really bad one I hated, Green Dot. Don't recommend that one. But, Temporary by Hilary Letcher. When done well, I love a book about workism. This cover is unreal. I want this tattooed. This is Wildcat Dome by Yuko Tsushima, published by FSG in the States. This is an epic, multi-generational post-war Japan novel. It says, Mitch and Yonko have not spoken in a year. As children, they were inseparable, raised together in an orphanage outside of Tokyo, but ever since the sudden death of Mitch's brother, they've been mourning in private ways, worlds apart. In the aftermath of the Fukushima nuclear catastrophe, they choose to reunite, finding each other in a city undone by disaster. Mitch and Yonko have drifted apart, but they'll always be bound together because long ago they witnessed an unspeakable tragedy they've kept secret their whole lives, and they never speak of it, but it's all around them. Like history, it repeats itself. This is a sweeping and consuming metaphysical saga of post-war Japan, an exploration of denial and the ways in which countries and citizens avoid telling the truth. This must be long, I'm assuming. Oh no, under 300 pages, but yeah, fascinating topic, fascinating bit of history, and a beautiful cover. What more could I need? Okay, back to the non-fiction. We have a book about British Asian community, unlike the other one, which was about Korean American. This is I Am Not a Tourist by Daisy J. Hung. Conversations on Being British Chinese is the byline. It says, though a citizen of the UK, Daisy is regularly mistaken for a tourist, asked where she's really from, or greeted with a ni hao on the assumption she speaks Mandarin. These experiences serve as a reminder that no matter how she moves through the world, she's often seen as an outsider. Here, Daisy explores what it means to be British Chinese today, the social, historical, and political factors that have got us here, fighting the narrow and dehumanizing stereotypes of Chinese people excelling in school, being devoid of leadership, or having authoritarian parents. She encourages readers to interrogate the assumptions and interpretations of a Chinese identity. In the wake of an upsurge in anti-Asian racism triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic known as the quote-unquote China virus and plague, I Am Not a Tourist exposes the ongoing racism and inequalities in the British Chinese community with an urgent call for change. Interesting that it has similar commentary on COVID, which speaks to, I think, the homogenization of Asian communities with the assumptions of those things about COVID and the virus and where it came from and whose fault it is, etc., etc. So, yeah, lovely to see a book published about in a British context on a similar topic. Then I have a Canadian book to talk about that's published by a disabled author. This is It Must Be Beautiful to Be Finished, a memoir of my body by Kate Gies. I have no idea how I'm going to get my hands on this, but I would really like to. It says, when Kate Gies was 4 years old, a plastic surgeon pressed a synthetic ear into the right side of her head and pulled out a mirror. He told her he could make her whole and right. She believed him. From the age of 4 to 13, she underwent 14 surgeries, including skin and bone grafts, to craft the appearance of an outer ear. Many surgeries failed and permanently damaged her body. In these short lyrical vignettes, Kate writes about her disfigured body. It was scrutinized, pathologized, and weaponized. She describes the physical and psychic trauma. Sorry, I don't know why the word psychic looks strange there. I guess the mental trauma of the medical intervention, its effect on her sense of self, first as a child seeing need to be fixed, and as a teenager and adult navigating the complex expectations and dangers of being a woman. So yeah, I think this sounds brilliant and fascinating and very reflective. So would love to find a way to find a copy of It Must Be Beautiful to be finished. Another memoir that is hugely anticipated by so many people that will be a difficult read. This is Saving Five, a memoir of hope, a memoir by Amanda Nguyen. Amanda's story is pretty well known by now, I think, but she was a Jane Doe who was raped and anonymously submitted her rape kit in fear of her name being sort of like tarnished in her future dreams to become a NASA astronaut. Maybe not an astronaut, just to work for NASA. But when you file anonymously after sexual violence, you only have 6 months to bring together a case, which is unlike other situations, which is, obviously so wrong. And it says, this is a memoir of survival and hope. Saving Five boldly braids the story of the Nguyens activism, which resulted in the Congress's unanimous passage of the Sexual Assault Survivors' Rights Act in 2016, with a second beautifully imagined adventure of Nguyens' younger selves as they, at ages 5, 15, 22, and 30, navigate the dramatic incarnations of the emotional stage of her path towards healing. Not only rape, but the violent turmoil of her childhood, a groundbreaking work that seamlessly blends together memoir with the moving journey of acceptance and hope. Forging together a path as inspiring as it is instructive. From one of the most influential activists, and now, she is an astronaut, I thought so. Saving Five is a tribute to resilience and celebration of healing. Really like the way it says she talks about the future and sort of reconfiguring her ideals at those different ages, not to focus entirely on the horrific act of violence that happened to her. I think this could be really healing and moving and, brilliantly brave to write it. Okay, a penultimate memoir to talk about. We have Firstborn Girls, a memoir by Bernice L. McFadden, published by Penguin in the US. The author is a creative writing professor, and this is an intimate and powerful portrait of inherited trauma, family secrets, and the bonds between mothers and daughters. On her second birthday in 1967, Bernice McFadden died in a car crash near Detroit, but was resuscitated by her after her mother pulled her from the flaming wreckage. This is the story of her remarkable life from that moment until the publication of her first novel, Sugar. I have heard lots of people talk about Sugar. I have not read it myself. Growing up in 1960s Brooklyn, Bernice finds solace in books, summer trips to Barbados, and boarding school to escape her alcoholic father. She discovers the work of Alice Walker and Toni Morrison and sees herself and loved ones reflected in these stories of messy, beautiful, joyful Black people. Interwoven with her personal journey is a family history, starting with her 4-time enslaved great-grandmother, Louisa Vicey Wilson, in 1922 Georgia, and the descendants that survived the Reconstruction and Jim Crow, the Great Migration, and mourned Dr. King's assassination during the Civil Rights Movement. These women's wisdom, secrets, and fierce love are passed down like Louisa's handmade quilt, a memoir of many, many threads. Doesn't that sound beautiful? And I love the cover. That is Firstborn Girls. That we have the books of March and February. I will promise and endeavour to keep up with these and show you what's coming out in the rest of the spring. Let me know if any of these are on your radar. Maybe you've read some of them already or you're waiting for them at the library. Please comment below. It really helps the channel. And if you could give this video a like and subscribe if you're not already, that would be great. And I'll see you all again soon.